Welcome to Motorcycles and Coffee, where I, Florian Neuhauser, Editor-in-Chief of RoadRUNNER Motorcycle Touring and Travel Magazine, ride around the country and talk to interesting motorcycle riders. On today's episode, I have Marisa and Caleb McInturff with me. If you've been reading the magazine, you've surely seen their byline. They write articles, travel stories, motorcycle reviews, do all of their own photography, a whole lot of videography, and a lot of editing as well. They truly are motorcycle journalists extraordinaire. On top of it, Marisa is also RoadRUNNER's managing editor. And Caleb is an engineer who has his own motorcycle mechanic shop at the moment. Welcome Marisa, and welcome Caleb.
Thanks for having us.
Hey there, thanks for having us. We're cruising down 104 in New Mexico right now. We're on a trip together and we are marveling at this wide open space and scenery. This landscape is quite unlike the first time we've met, which, when was the first time we met?
2015 in Ecuador.
All right, in 2015, my brother and I met you guys on an organized tour in Ecuador with Freedom Tours and Bike Rental with Cord and Sylvain. At the time you were writing for a different publication, and it was a fun tour in Ecuador, wasn't it?
Without a doubt, that was a blast, absolute trip of a lifetime, and we were lucky enough to be there with cool people.
That was actually our honeymoon trip.
Yeah.
So we kind of planned work for the first 9 days, and then when you all left, we stayed for another 2 weeks and explored all over. We actually went back to some of our favorite spots that we went to on the organized trip. So we ended up going back. We spent a lot of time in Baños because it was just a really pretty town right there on the cliff with the river. Lots of really cool riding in the area. That was a really fun trip.
And we were a small group. I mean, it was the four of us, and then we had a pair of friends from Australia, Bert and Mike, that were really fun to travel with. I'm guessing they were probably in their late 60s, but they were a blast to travel with.
Hilarious guys. Always had a great story about whatever we were talking about.
And I have so many good memories from this trip. And it was an organized trip, and I also have organized and led motorcycle trips, and it's just funny that I was a guest on another tour, and I did the one mistake that always drove me nuts on our own tours, which was the itinerary and the information every day. On our Blue Rim tours, we always prepared these really nice itineraries and books that described every day where we left every morning, the hotel, what we were about to see each day. And you know, I showed up in Ecuador and I read nothing. And it was, you know, and I did it to myself. Completely my own fault, because every day I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know where we were going, what we were going to see, and everything was more or less a surprise. And it was only a few days in that it occurred to me that you two always knew what was going on. So that's when I had to ask, and you were gracious in your answer that all the information is on the website and I just have to read. So that's on me. What were your memories from that trip?
Honestly, one of my main ones is meeting you and your brother, because I mean we kind of hit it off and had a pretty good connection, and we're kind of friends pretty much right from the start, and that was a big part of it. Of course, just the landscape of that place is breathtaking. It's an absolutely amazing place. But I gotta say, I mean, meeting y'all was one of the best things. What about you, Marisa?
I think the diversity of the landscape and the fact that you could be in the Andes Mountains in the morning at like 15,000, 14,000 feet was the highest road that we rode on one of the days. And then by late afternoon, we could be sitting on the beach. And then every possible landscape in between. You go from the high alpine, high mountains down into the rainforest and then to the coastline. So in one day, that was really cool.
Yeah, the weather doesn't really change because that's the name. It's right on the equator. And so the only way the weather changes is if you change altitude. So, I mean, it's hot and sweltering at the beach, and then in the mountains it's cool, and it's just always that way.
It was the first time and the only time I have ever tried to surf.
How did that go?
I fell a lot. It's harder than it looks.
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
And it was a fun trip because we were such a small group and everybody got along so well. And there were certain things that we bonded over, like the process of fueling up the bikes and unloading a can of chain lube on the bikes each time we gassed up. I mean, Caleb, you're the engineer. Please just describe this.
They were just insistent on that, and they were using so much chain lube. I'm not sure that it was washing on replacing chains. He's not exaggerating. They would almost use a whole, for 6 bikes, they would pretty much use a whole can at each stop. And I'm not sure that the cost benefit was washing on that. They probably had more in chain lube than on chains, and also, I mean, these sealed O-ring chains, if they're in good condition, they're pretty much sealed. So if you're lubing them and not cleaning them, you know, you might just be making a grinding paste that's going to wear your chain out sooner. So that's a contentious topic, though.
So it's better to clean and not lube than to lube and not clean.
Well, you do want to lube it because you don't want it to rust. The chain will rust, and the primary function of the chain, the primary function of the chain lube is to keep the chain from rusting, especially if you store the motorcycle. So these thick, waxy chain lubes that you get, a lot of times you'll just see them, you know, I know you've seen one that's just built up with gunk and dirt and dust all over it, and I mean, that's most definitely wearing it out sooner.
Yeah.
And so it slings off really fast, and I clean my chain often, so it's not a big deal, but I just use WD-40 or one of the thinner chain lubes, like an off-road chain lube, just to keep it from rusting, especially if I store the motorcycle for any long period of time.
It was one of those scenes that is just burned into my memory, and it's something I think of often, not as often as I lube my own chain at home, which I almost never do, but I think about the Ecuador trip, you know, once a year when I actually do lube my chain. It's something that is just so stuck into my memory, and I'll always have fond memories of this. But Cord and Savon do a great job of this tour, and one of the reasons I liked it so much was all of the off-the-bike activities. I mean, Marisa, you already mentioned the surfing, which was a blast, but we got to tour a coffee plantation, and we got to tour a chocolate plantation and got to learn how chocolate is made. And in Baños, we had a rest day. Yes, we got to tour a banana plantation. And then in Baños, we had a rest day, and our group of 6 got to choose how to spend this day, and we wanted to go rafting. And even Bert and Mike were all gung-ho to go rafting, so it was our group of 6 that went on this excursion. And when we were at the spot where we put the rafts in the water, we started our "Tsiki-tsaki, hoi, hoi, hoi" chant, and all of the other rafts went silent and looked over to us, and they knew we're here for business.
I hadn't thought about that in years, Florian. Now that you mention it, the rafting was my favorite part. Our battle cry, we were so good at running the raft that the raft guide flipped us out on purpose so the other rafts wouldn't feel so bad.
Correction, flipped you guys out. I stayed in the boat.
Very true.
Marisa was a whitewater raft guide, so she was able to hang on, but she did not do us the courtesy of telling us what was coming, so we did get flipped out.
Sorry about
you know,
that.
had we been warned by our local expert, then maybe we wouldn't have, but she, I guess, didn't see it necessary to do so.
Listen, I saw it coming last second and I knew what he was about to do and I just had to brace for it.
And our guide, I mean, we have the photo evidence. Our guide didn't do anything other than flip us out on purpose. On the photos, you see him using his paddle as a guitar as all of us fall into the water, except you, of course, Marisa. And then you had the job of pulling all of us back into the raft, which, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, he was just hanging out.
I've been rafting a few times in my life and around the world, and that was not an easy river. I mean, those were some big rapids.
It was gnarly. It really was
gnarly. The thing
gnarly.
that swallowed us was called the Bus Eater.
The name of the river was the Pastanza.
I still remember that. He drove that into our brains.
And of course, the riding was spectacular in Ecuador too. We had
Some of the
curves,
best.
we had high altitude riding, great scenery. There was quite a bit of off-road too, and one of them was a little more challenging with all the construction, and we had to go over some baby heads with some pretty big rocks, and it was challenging. But I mean, even Bert and Mike, I mean, we just trucked right on through.
They railed right through it. I was so proud of them. They had they had a baby doll that if you dropped your bike, they would make you ride for the rest of the day and the next day, I believe, with the baby doll on your bike, and nobody got the baby doll, even through the baby heads.
I think it was until the next person dropped their bike and then you could pass it off.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Don't hold me to that.
I'm a big fan of this type of public shaming. It really keeps you in check and makes you work extra hard not to drop your bike.
Totally. I think we should bring back public shaming, just in general, but that's a different topic.
Well, it's just like when you say your group is meeting at 7 a.m. to get ready to go, and if you are late, if you're the last person out and ready on your bike and it's past the meeting time, you have to buy the first round that night.
There's always that guy too.
Yeah, that's always my rule too. If you make the group wait, the first round of the evening is on you.
Yeah.
That's a hard rule.
Yeah. Look at this road.
This is amazing. What a spot. I'm so enchanted right now. I see why they call it that.
Look at this hill, just this road, arrow straight.
It's hilarious. The rule that Marisa just mentioned about buying the first round. We went on a tour in Europe not too long ago, and we were there with some pretty well-off people that had done, you know, created businesses and done really well for themselves. And one guy was notorious for being late, but he was wealthy enough to where he didn't care. He just always bought the first round.
Every night.
Every night.
You always need a guest like that on each tour. On an organized tour, it's obviously tricky to really put together a good cohesive group, but if you travel with your friends, I always think that every member of the group has to have a specific job. Like, one person is the dedicated mechanic, one person is the dedicated photographer, then you have a person that's the dedicated salesperson and he'll chat up all the strangers along the way. But everybody needs a job.
What's your job on this trip, Florian? Are you the influencer?
I'm the influencer and I'm the MasterCard. I'm the sponsor. I'm the producer.
That's important.
The trip sponsor.
And as of yesterday, I'm the sheriff too.
Oh.
Yep. You have a lot of
I'm a few
responsibility.
years older than you guys, so I'm here. I'm the wise elder statesman on this trip, making sure nothing stupid goes down.
The chaperone.
Or at least partake in it.
The adult.
And after Ecuador, we only briefly lost touch. I mean, that's 9 years ago. And then we did stay in contact because we needed some help for our touring weekend. We needed some extra guides and just general some more staff to help out with the event. And you were kind enough to help us out. And that's really what then got the ball rolling to start working together. Because after the touring weekend, I asked you to do a few travel stories, and yeah, I mean, it just went from there. I mean,
I've got a story for you. I don't know if I've ever told you this, Florian. It's okay, because we haven't mentioned anybody else that we've worked with, which has been a few people. So, when we went to Ecuador, we found out that we were going with some people from RoadRUNNER Touring and Travel Magazine. And we were warned that the people from RoadRUNNER Touring and Travel Magazine, they're very business oriented. They're very serious. They're very
Uptight.
uptight.
Okay.
That's what I was
Yeah.
right. That's what we were told. And I don't know if we were nervous, because we're not really like that, but we were a little on edge at first.
We were just curious to see who we'd spend 9 days with.
And that could not be further from the truth.
It was funny because the first time we met was in their headquarters when we were getting the bikes and getting geared up and loading, and they wanted us to all put the U-Clear devices in our helmets so that we could all talk. And you and Manuel looked at each other and said, nope.
yeah, okay. All right, so it is the first time that I hear this story, but
Really?
I do have to agree that, yeah, okay, if that was our first interaction, and I wouldn't be mad if you thought that we were a bunch of for refusing to install the communicators, but, you know, and maybe this was in the material sent to us ahead of time, but that was the first time I heard about it, and we brought the wrong helmets, and I wasn't about to be on a, you know, week-long plus trip and have uncomfortable earpieces in my helmet. So that's the main reason I refused.
I would have made the same decision. I'm not discrediting you.
If it was us now, right, if it was us now, we were not just getting started, but we hadn't been doing that very long at the time, and if it was us now, we probably would have done the same thing. Because you just never know who you're going to get stuck in a helmet with for 9 days.
It actually turned out pretty good because we didn't talk all that much, but Court or Savon, they would rotate who was the lead rider and who was driving the chase truck. But as we were riding, they would mention things like, off to the left, this is this mountain.
That was nice. That's why you didn't know what was going on, Florian.
Very true, yeah. I was out of the loop. I was not in the circle of trust.
It was pretty cool to have a guide in your helmet, though, as you're riding by, instead of stopping and only getting the information when you're on the side of the road.
But the communicators sucked. They were terrible.
They were awful. On the positive, though, when we were trying to pass vehicles, we would go around a blind corner, and in a time where I normally would never pass a vehicle in a blind corner, if you hear the people ahead of you talking to in your communicator, and they're saying, hey, it's clear, you come around the corner, it's a straightaway, there's no one coming, then I don't have a problem with going around the corner.
But we didn't do much passing.
We did some.
No, we didn't do a whole lot of passing, because if I remember correctly, we had to pull over several times on the main roads to let other cars and buses and trucks pass us, which, I mean, it really did hurt my ego. I mean, that's riding a motorcycle. I want to do the passing, not be passed.
Yeah.
That's how it should be.
I do remember doing quite a bit of passing, though, and this was my first time riding in another country, and the driving was a little erratic from the locals. But
it was a lot to get used to.
It was a lot to get used to, but we would be on a big open stretch of highway. Let's say we're on a 4-lane highway, and there's cars in every lane going this way and that way, and we would pass right up the middle, so we'd be 5 vehicles wide on the road passing. That was
and
a
it
little...
sounds like chaos, and it was organized chaos, but I didn't see one automotive accident the entire time I was there in almost a month.
I have a theory about that. I think that in those countries, you can't be on your phone texting or be distracted, because you will run into, you have to be paying attention. And so because everyone's paying attention, there's less wrecks.
There's that, and there's no guardrails on a lot of these mountains, and so you better pay attention or you are going to fall to your death.
But I'm glad you learned that we're not as uptight as you were led on to believe, because, you know, maybe people thought that because, well, RoadRunner's successful and we have our ducks in a row, maybe that's why they had that impression. And maybe because we're Austrian and, well, maybe they got us confused with the Germans because they're the worst, obviously.
I think it's very much, it's a culture that we fit very well in with. It's work as hard as possible and play as hard as possible. And that's, I think, why we're good friends.
Yeah, and I think it helped that my brother was on the trip too. I mean, he's a big-time volunteer for the magazine and a big reason of the success, but he always adds a level of fun and excitement too. And this was already a few years into a tradition my brother and I had, where we go on one trip a year together, and which was really special. And it didn't end there, because after we started working together with the touring weekend, then I'm very proud to say that I was able to poach you away from your current employer, Marisa, and you became our managing editor.
Yep.
So I'm very happy that you're a full-time RoadRunner now. And it's just, yeah, we work together really, really well. And we continued the tradition of our yearly trips. One year we went to the Northeast and did the Northeast BDR, the four of us. And the same thing, this time we were all connected with Bluetooth communicators, and that really cranked up the trip to an 11. I mean, it was such a blast.
Yeah, we usually have some pretty good banter.
I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my helmet than on that trip. So whose communicator was it? We were in Montana doing snow biking. This was another one of our annual trips. And
just one of the best motorcycling experiences I've ever had.
Somebody's helmet communicator died, and so we all weren't able to talk to each other.
You know, I had so much fun on that trip that I didn't even remember the communicator thing, but you're right, Caleb. That was the best motorcycle trip ever, and it was on a ski and a track.
Right, not even really a motorcycle, I guess.
Yeah, but the NEBDR was such a fun trip because we were able to pretty much take our time, because it was mostly, or a good chunk of it was off-road. So we weren't blasting down the freeway at 60 miles an hour. And the days were long, and we just had some great conversation. And yeah, hey, I learned a lot about you guys too, because you had these little backpacks on. And a few days into the trip, I'm like, is that a gun in there? It's like, I thought it was a hydration pack the whole time. I was like, hey, are you guys packing? And we must have talked for at least an hour about guns and how fast, Caleb, you can draw your gun.
It might not be apparent from our accents, but we are Southern, so we have a certain way about us.
Yep. And they were hydration packs too, by the way.
Yeah, it's both. It's both.
Okay, so it was safety all around.
Yeah, definitely.
I have since learned a little bit more about guns. I've been to the shooting range once, shot a little 22 and a 50 caliber, and then late last year, my brother took me to a place in Miami where we were able to shoot fully automatic rifles, which, I mean, talk about an experience.
Yeah, that's a hoot.
Because what's better than riding motorcycles? Riding motorcycles and shooting guns.
The main problem with firearms as a hobby is they are at least as expensive as motorcycles. They're expensive to feed.
So is the case with all of the hobbies we tend to get ourselves into.
Oh, every time. I love cars too, and man, that's part of the reason I got into motorcycles, is because they're a little cheaper than cars as a hobby.
I, in the last couple of years, discovered fishing, And you would think that fishing would be a really cheap hobby?
No.
Wait a minute, fishing is not a cheap hobby?
You can get so carried away with all the rods and reels and tackle and equipment and
Up to and including $100,000+ boat. I mean, that's not even talking about the boat.
We don't have a boat. I have an inflatable kayak that I bought for $150. That's my fishing vehicle.
See, that's not my favorite type of fishing. I'm a hillbilly from Appalachia and East Tennessee, and creek fishing.
That's my favorite kind.
Creek fishing, walking up, just hiking, slogging it up this mountain to somewhere where nobody's caught a fish in I don't know how many years. That's what does it for me. But I worked with a guy for a while that was an absolute bass fishing fanatic, and I don't even want to mention how much money he spent on it. Absolutely incredible.
The tough thing with the creek fishing is that, so you're hiking back up, you have to get into these little out of the way places where no one else is. You use a really lightweight rod and tackle, and you're fishing you're fishing in relatively shallow areas. So
around rocks and trees.
Around rocks and trees, you have to be really precise with your casting. You kind of have to know where the fish like to hide. It makes it much more challenging than just throw a line in the water with a bobber and sit there and wait for something to bite.
And I mean, the biggest part of any fishing is fish psychology. Yeah, I mean, you got to be a fish psychologist. You got to know
You gotta
where
be a
they're
fish
going.
psychologist. You gotta put yourself into the mind of the
That's
fish.
right. That's right. Where's he going to be? What's he eat? What's he doing? Where's he going to be during the day? Where's he going to be during the night? During the middle of the day? During the middle of the year? I mean, it's something you can do for a lifetime and not be a master.
I like hobbies like that.
I guess it's a little bit true for motorcycling too, because there are so many different types of motorcycles. I mean, right now we're on these Harley-Davidson bikes, so I mean, there's a certain mindset we have to put ourselves into to fully enjoy this experience. I mean, same way as that when I go out on a dual sport ride, there's a completely different mentality. So you got to flip that switch.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
Marisa and I both tend to gravitate towards hobbies, though, that are easy to get into, motorcycling, firearms, fishing, whatever, but that have, golf's, Florian likes golf. Golf's another perfect example of this. It's something that's easy to get into, relatively easy to get into, but has no upper limit of skill. You could do these things for a lifetime and still not be a master.
And I think that's why hobbies are so important and so much fun, because you never really master it. You always continually, hopefully, get better. And it's just what keeps you coming back. But I have to say that there's probably no hobby out there that's cheap. I mean,
no.
We can even say if you like to run as a hobby, I'm pretty sure people that are serious runners also say it's not a cheap hobby.
It's not, because you have to buy a new pair of shoes every year, if you run a lot. We actually photograph an ultra marathon, and those people have got some money in the travel to the places where they do the races, the equipment, the shoes, the
hotel room, the fuel, everything.
All of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting photographing those events, because I'll stand around. These people run 25 miles, 50 miles, or sometimes 100 miles, and it's all on trails. So it's hiking trails through some of our local forests. And these people will start at 5 a.m. and some of them won't finish until 5 a.m. or later the next day. I mean, they're literally running for 24 hours. They take breaks and stuff, but I mean, it's insane how long that they push their bodies. And we'll be out there with a camera, and we have to run around and hike to different photo spots to get good pictures of everybody. And it's
about a 12-hour workday.
And it's challenging for us because we have to time, you know, how fast are the lead runners pacing themselves? Where are they going to be at a certain time in the day? Where's the other people going to be at the same time? We usually have one vehicle, so we have to drop somebody off in a certain location. The other person has to go to their location, then come back and get the person in time to get to the third place. So it's really a logistical, it's a logistical challenge just to be the photographers. And at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted, my legs hurt, I'm beat just from being out in the woods and taking their pictures. I can only imagine what these people feel like who run 100 miles.
Yeah, that's just crazy. I'd rather sit on a motorcycle.
Definitely. I'm more of an endurance motorcycle rider than anything else.
And even with motorcycle riding, yes, it's a hobby, but it's a hobby that you continually need to work on to get better.
For sure.
I mean, we've been riding these Harleys now for a couple of days, and we already started talking about taking the motor officer course just because it makes us better riders. Plus, it's really fun handling these big bikes with such aplomb. I had to put that word in there. People always criticize the magazine for using words like, oh, it handles with aplomb. It's a word that nobody would ever use in a conversation. So, ha, there it is.
I smile real big every time I hear Caleb scrape his floorboards turning around on the pavement.
I have meshed with this motorcycle. I love this motorcycle. I'm on a road glide, and I kind of love it more than I thought I would. I mean, it's not perfect, nothing ever is, but I kind of love it.
And I think it loves you too.
I would love to have a street glide in my garage. There, I said it.
I would 100% own a road glide.
Especially this one. I mean, it might be your spirit animal. I mean, even the paint job is called Whiskey Fire.
I love the orange, the Whiskey
Your
Fire.
helmet handle on this trip is Whiskey Fire. That's your trail name, your helmet handle.
That's a hillbilly joke that they're ribbing me for. I'm kind of a spicy ginger hillbilly type, so they've dubbed me Whiskey Far.
Whiskey Far.
Which is exactly how my parents would say it.
Took me a few tries to get the pronunciation.
Florian's gonna go home after this trip and sound much more southern than he started with.
Yeah, where I'm from, you change your oil, you wash your car, you wash your laundry. Yeah, it's people from where I'm from ask me where I'm from, and I mean, you probably hear some accent in me, but people from where I'm from ask me where I'm from, and my great some odd grandfather was one of the first people to settle in Eastern Tennessee. So I'm hillbilly as they come, but I just didn't get the accent. Not thick like my parents have it.
You definitely get the accent, because I had no accent before meeting you, and now 14 years later, people think that my southern accent is cute. I've heard that a lot.
I mean, I know I have a southern accent, but what I mean is people from there that have a thick accent, they don't hear it.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, you've met my parents.
When I was working with Twisted Throttle, of course, they're based in Rhode Island, so there were a bunch of people from Boston and just surrounding area. They had a really, really thick New England accent. And every time we were in a meeting, somebody made a comment about how I said a word.
And Marissa's accent is even more mild than mine.
Mine's
And they're
very
the ones
mild.
to talk. I mean, talk about, I'm taking the car to the garage.
Yeah.
I know.
Go down the stairs to play my guitar.
Yeah, that's a thick one.
I know.
So you like this Harley, huh, Caleb? So tell me about your other bikes.
Okay. Well, I like all types of motorcycles. I started out on sport bikes, so that's probably my first love. I grew up about 15 minutes from the tail of the dragon, Highway 129. But I met Marisa, and she kind of in college, and she got me into riding dual sport and adventure bikes, just because you can have one bike that does everything pretty well. And my go-to is I have a KTM 990 Adventure with some slick mods, and I love that thing. I will keep that for as long as I can. I will keep that for as long as it's tenable to keep it, and ride it. I mean, in fact, I've had 3 of them. So, and I got mine and rode it for a while, and then Marisa got her a 950 because she rode it. She had a different bike for many years, and she rode mine enough to where she finally kicked rocks at that thing and let it go, and got a 950.
Are there any bikes that you sold and wish you haven't?
Several. One of which is actually a Harley. I had a Harley Sportster 1200 that was modified, and that thing was bad. It had camshafts, some head work. It had quite a bit of work done to it, and it was in a drag race. It would destroy a sport bike from red light to red light or 8th mile. I used to do a lot of drag racing, and in an 8th mile drag race, it would destroy a sport bike. And it was comfortable. It was a little too loud, but I was young at the time. I got over that. But I missed that bike. It was the Sportster 1200. I should have never got rid of that. Perfect paint job, perfect finish on it and everything. Not too much chrome. Should have never got rid of that. And I had a 950. I'm not a KTM fanboy, but I had a 950 Supermoto that I still think about that bike. I should have never let that thing go.
That's a collector's item now.
Yeah, I know, and now I'll have a hard time getting another one for a decent price. I don't know, the 950s are attainable. The 990 Supermoto is, you won't find one of those for a reasonable price. But anyway, yeah, those are probably my two bikes that got away that I should have never let go. What about you, Flo?
Motorcycles have come and gone in our garage. It kind of ebbs and flows. There's a span of a few years where we accumulate all these motorcycles to a point where we don't have enough time to ride them all, and then we think, oh, this is ridiculous, and we sell them all. And then there's a year or two where we barely have any motorcycles in the garage, and we're like, hey, I think we should buy a motorcycle. And that's when it starts again. So right now we're on the upward trend again, but I'm hoping that's I'm assuming it's every gearhead that thinks this way, that I hope I don't have to sell any of these bikes. And I like them all. I have a Honda Trail 125 right now. I hope I don't ever sell that one. I have a Triumph Scrambler 1200 XE. I absolutely love it. It's got balls. It's so predictable on gravel roads when you drift them around, and it's just a classically good looking motorcycle. It turns heads. And then of course I have my Yamaha T7. It's my second one, because the first one I let go too soon and I immediately regretted it. So now I have my second T7, and that's also a bike it does the majority of my dual sport duty.
So what's the longest you've had a motorcycle?
One oil change. No, I'm just kidding. For a while that was the joke, because we went through motorcycles so quickly that I barely had enough time to change the tires or change the oil. But it's
old.
Sometimes it was, a riding season, a short riding season, and sometimes it was a year. But we've definitely churned through a lot of motorcycles. The bikes I wish we didn't sell were all of my dad's vintage bikes, because after my dad passed away, we had the 78 Triumph Bonneville 750. I mean, that just required a lot of attention mechanically. And then we had the 72 Yamaha XS650. That one ran like a champ. But again, if nobody ever rides them, it's just kind of a waste that they're sitting in the garage. But
Harder on something to sit than it is to ride it.
yeah, I wish we had those bikes still.
Whatever become of the bike that they rode the Route 66 on?
Oh, that little Kawasaki, that one's been long and gone. So it was, I don't know exactly which model it was. I'll have to see what the name was in America, or if it even was over here. But that was his first motorcycle, because like most new riders, he got, you know, a cruiser, a tourer. That was his first bike. He shipped it to America twice, once for Route 66, once for the Pacific Coast Highway. But he quickly realized that he really likes curves and a little more spirited pace. And then his second bike was a Yamaha Diversion, which I also have to look up what the name was in America. And he only had that one for a couple of years, if not a very short time. And then his third motorcycle was the 97 Triumph Tiger. And that's the motorcycle that, and my mom had a 99 Speed Triple, and those are the two bikes they brought over to America when we moved here. And when we started the magazine in 2001, you see those bikes in the magazine frequently.
I got one of the hardest questions that I've ever had to answer. What is your favorite motorcycle?
Oh, that's such a loaded question.
The one.
I always say it depends. I mean, it's a motorcycle. If there's only one perfect motorcycle, it's one bike that has to do it all. And it has to be good long distances, it has to be comfortable, it has to be fun in the curves, it has to do off-road, so I'm not limited on where I can go. So it has to be, in that sense, it has to be a, you know, mid-size or large travel enduro. That would be the perfect bike for me. But then it always depends, but where am I riding? And then it changes it. I mean, right now we're in New Mexico, and I wouldn't want to be on a GS, I wouldn't want to be on a KTM Adventure. This is Harley country. I want to be on a Harley-Davidson in this part of the country.
Fair enough, fair enough. And you nailed all the points of why my 990 Adventure is my favorite bike. I mean,
Same.
If I picked a sport bike, you know, it would be one of the Ducatis or a Tuono, Aprilia Tuono, although I'm not sure I want to maintenance that or pay for maintenance for it. But yeah, I mean, that's why I've had a 990 Adventure. I've had 3 over the years, but that's why I've had one for over a decade at this point, just because it's rowdy, it's good enough in the corners, the suspension's crazy good, and it's good enough for long distance touring. You know, if you had to do what we're doing now, it would be great. Obviously not as good as the Harley. That's of course the drawback with the big travel enduros, is they're good at everything, but they're great at nothing, you know.
I don't know, my 950 is pretty darn great.
That is one bike I would love to have. It's either the 950 or 990. I wouldn't be too picky, but every time I'm on that motorcycle, it's just, I mean, we're like this. You can't see me, but look at my fingers, we're like this.
It has a character like nothing else, really.
I have 20% battery left, but let me get this story in real quick. The very first time I was on the 950 Adventure was in New Mexico. This was a very memorable trip. It was the first time my dad and I did a trip together, just the two of us. And the plan was to fly into Phoenix and then do a big loop around New Mexico. He would have been on he was on the 950 Adventure, and he wanted me to be on the 640 Adventure just because it was smaller, and I was like 16 at the time. And we picked those bikes up, and we got one day out of Phoenix before my KTM crapped out on the side of the highway in the desert. And I literally pushed that bike back to civilization. Long story short, they came and picked up that motorcycle. What it ended up being is when they shipped it from Austria, they assembled it wrong, and there was like a needle in the carburetor that was upside down. That's why it stopped working. But a replacement bike for me came, and it was the 950 Adventure S. Now that's the blue model. That was the top dog. And as a 16-year-old, I mean, I was in love. I mean, the 640, the short amount of time I rode it was cool, but the 950S, I mean, we bonded. I mean, we railed through corners. I mean, it was the most beautiful experience.
It's a hell of a machine. They are still relevant today, even up against some of the best adventure bikes out there.
I think at this point the 950 is considered a vintage bike. Is it 20 years?
I think it's 20 years, yeah. So next year yours will, but there's a 2004, so that would be.
Yeah. At this point I think it could be considered a vintage bike. But you know, you probably ended up ending up on the 950 over the 640 because the 640 is a heck of a paint shaker.
Oh my God, I had one of those, and you would get off, it wasn't terrible off-road, but you'd get off that thing. I had the Enduro. You would get off that thing at the end of the day if you're riding mostly road, if it wasn't mostly off-road, and your hands would be buzzing. They had a lot of power, but they did that by not counterbalancing the engine very much. So they're terrible.
It would shake the eyeballs in my eye sockets. I mean, I couldn't see straight.
They're crazy.
Hey guys, it's 101 degrees. This is the perfect time to stop and get an iced coffee. I don't think I can do a hot coffee. And we'll pick up our conversation there.
Sounds good. Let's head on in and find a good little coffee shop in Tucumcari.
Perfect. I can't wait for an iced coffee.
That was one hot ride today. I'm really glad that these clouds came in, and finally I think we're gonna get a little bit of rain.
I wouldn't mind it if the clouds just stuck around the rest of the ride.
Yeah, that would be all right.
Right now we're riding Route 66, and this is an anniversary of many sorts. My parents did this trip 30 years ago, so that's one anniversary. Route 66 is celebrating their centennial in 2026, which is the main reason we're on this ride. And to top it off, RoadRUNNER Magazine is celebrating the 25th anniversary next year. So hooray for everybody involved, lots of anniversaries going. Route 66 is a special trip. We've seen a lot of cool stuff already, but what are some of the challenges you found from being on the road for that long?
Well, we're on the road for 17 days total, so you have to be cautious not to overpack, because the last thing you want to do is have to lug stuff back and forth into a hotel. Challenge there is obviously doing laundry, and with as much sweating as we've been doing on this trip, that's been a challenge for me because you pretty much get one wear out of your clothes before you have to wash it. So we're doing a lot of sink laundry.
Yeah, especially because we try not to ever check bags. We've been burned by that before. And it's rough to keep everything clean and smelling decent to where you can go in a restaurant, you know.
I also like to have extra space just on the bike in case we pick up extra water or we decide to turn saddlebag into a cooler.
Marisa likes her trinkets too. Gotta have trinket space.
Very true. We just completed a video on how to pack for a 7-day motorcycle ride, and I stressed that no matter how long the trip is, I pack for 7 days, which I didn't follow my own advice for this trip. I packed for 3 days, and that's really because I only wanted to fly with a backpack. I didn't check luggage. And then, just like you said, once on the ride, I wanted extra space in my saddlebags for the water, of course, and the ice, and for all the things that I pick up along the way. How about some of the challenges from working from the road? I know it's not easy.
That's more of a question for you. You've been doing it longer than I have. I think the biggest challenge is making sure that you have enough completed before you leave for the trip. Because if you have a huge list of to-dos and then you're on the road for 2 weeks it makes it really challenging to do a full riding day, especially in this heat. By the time you stop for the day, have dinner, it's 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and the last thing you want to do is spend 4 hours on a computer. So for me anyway, it was a lot of pre-planning, getting stuff done ahead of time, lots of pre-scheduling, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm almost in the same boat. I try to work ahead as much as possible so I don't have to do anything that's really urgent on the trip. But I also rely on a great staff back at home if something does need to get completed. But like you said, we're on the road for, many hours, and we usually get to the hotel at 5 or 6. And, you got to have good internet. Technology does make it easier, but it doesn't help if you don't have great internet. And then, it's planning ahead, and just sometimes you just have some really, really long days, which, 2 nights ago, I got the serious giggles at the end of the day. I was dehydrated, I wasn't fed enough, which is my own fault. And then, after so many hours on the road and the wind noise and everything, something happens in my brain and I just can't contain my laughter, and
It's fatiguing.
I can't work. It's
Very much.
Yeah. How many takes did it take for us to take
It only took like 40 minutes.
40 minutes for a 30-second video.
Yeah, maybe less.
Yeah, but these are, of all the things that we see on this trip on Route 66, that filming session I will remember forever. That is one thing that I will not
was
forget.
memorable for sure. That was just fun. It's still fun, even though it took us a while to get it right. I'm lucky enough to be sort of running my own thing right now, and I'm not bringing my tools or customer motorcycles on the road with me. So I'm just here filming, working, and I do work late on this project, but my full-time job is back at home.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, on a trip, everybody has to have a job. And Marisa, you did a fantastic job organizing this entire trip, planning out every single day. I mean, we have a description of every day. We have a whole bullet list of all the things we will see each day, and then a to-do list for every day too. And it's great because you also made a to-do list for me. Usually it's the other way around. Usually I tell you a to-do list, but it makes it really easy since you planned everything that I know what my job is on this trip. So you're doing all the photography, you're both doing all the video work, and my job on this trip is to create all of the reels for social media, which I haven't done all that much before, but it's always something new to learn. So taking a whole lot of videos, and then editing video is a completely different beast.
Oh man, that's a task.
Yeah.
That's
You've been
a
doing a
task.
great job, though.
They're great.
There's several of them that I've gone back even after I've seen them a few times and watched again. In fact, last night I sat down for about an hour to write out some notes of things that we've experienced along the way, because on a trip this long, there's no way you're going to remember the day to day. And I went back and watched your reels to remind myself what we did that day, and then I was able to write more notes. So.
Yeah, very true. It's like a diary that will never go away.
Yeah.
It's really good for the audience of RoadRunner, but for personal reasons, these little videos they will live on forever. So hopefully I will get reminders in a couple of years. Hey, you did Route 66, and then we can look back on it.
Bucket list trip. It's been great. I've always been a car person, and I love all this culture, the 2-lane blacktop, the American graffiti style movies. Like, these are formative movies for me when I was a kid. Smokey and the Bandit, doing this trip is just bringing all that back.
Yeah, Smokey the Bandit, Cannonball Run.
Yeah.
I must say, this is, even in Austria, I watched those movies, and this is what I always expected out of America.
Yeah.
Talking about bucket list trips, so this is obviously a bucket list trip for not just us, but probably for everybody.
Right.
What are some other trips that are on your to-do list?
To do or have done?
Both.
So we were lucky enough to go ride around Alaska. That was like you would think it would be. Just amazing, breathtaking beauty everywhere. It's almost desensitizing when you ride around Alaska. Like you just get desensitized to it when you're riding around, and your neck hurts from look at that, and it's just the entire time. Mm-hmm. So that's amazing. Ecuador, where we met you, was just an amazing ride. I really want to ride through the Andes in Chile and
Peru, definitely Peru.
Yeah,
Peru.
Absolutely, yeah.
I really want to do that. I'd say.
Australia's on my list.
So we spent
Australia?
Australia. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to do the main road. That's both on our list.
Yeah.
That's on both our lists. I want to do the main road all the way around, which takes some planning.
Oh yeah, and that's going to take a little while.
Right.
And while you're down there, you got to do New Zealand, and since
Yeah.
you're there, throw in Tasmania. So
Might as well.
just plan for, let's say, 3 months, but then you really can say you've done it.
Right.
That's true.
Right. I really want to go. So we did a European tour this past summer. I really want to go spend more time in just Austria and just Italy. Just do.
I know a guy.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, we can make that happen.
Okay.
What about you? What are some of your bucket list trips?
Well, Australia is the one that I've always been interested in that culture and wanting to see that country. What was that island that for a while I was researching quite a bit? They have the pink sand beaches, and it's
What kind of beaches?
they have pink sand beaches, but you can't do any filming there because it's against their rules.
Bali?
No, Bermuda, I think. Is it Bermuda?
I can't remember. I feel like
Well,
it's been
it's been a while.
a decade since you talked about that. We've got
maybe.
our bucket list only grows, unfortunately. That's
It never
that's
gets
really
smaller,
the problem.
does it?
Yeah.
That's really the problem.
As far as in the U.S., I'd like to do more in Idaho and Washington State and Oregon. That's the area that I haven't gotten to explore a whole lot.
I feel like Idaho is kind of a lesser known hidden gem. It's
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous.
Idaho is beautiful. And one trip that I would still like to do with you two is the Continental Divide, but on little bikes.
Yeah.
I'm so down.
Go slow, enjoy the view, and if we can figure it out, maybe do camping along the way.
Yeah, I would love that. That is one thing. We kind of end up with these rowdy adventure bikes, and we we're all pretty decent, and so we ride along pretty good. And being forced to do it on a 125 would be
Make you slow down
that
and
would-
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you'd smell the coffee a little better, I think. Yeah, that would be a blast.
Yeah, and you'll probably smell some other things burning. I rode my little trail 125 for 6 days straight, a little too much, and it's not the same anymore. It needs some work.
Well, luckily we
Yeah.
have a mechanic with us.
Yeah, you might have to go all the way through that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I still need to bring my Puch Maxi
Yeah.
to you because
Yeah.
when I visited you, I told you about it, but I haven't been back since. But that moped is still in my shed, and
Let's do it.
I got to bring that over, and might as
do
well
it.
just load up the Trail 125 too.
Let's do it.
Yeah. What about you? What's a bucket list that you've not accomplished yet?
Like you said, there are so many. It just still keeps on growing. There's a place, Barber Motorsports, and the museum. It's still on the very high
great.
list. I have to go there. Then I would still like to go up to the Canadian provinces, Newfoundland. I would really like to see all that. And my wife Sarah really wants to go to Prince Edward Island, so definitely taking her along. And now with 2 little boys at home, it gets a little trickier going on really long trips. So the idea is to load everybody up in the car and just go drive around America, and then figure out a motorcycle and then do some touring there, just to really get a good coverage of America. But internationally, well, it's so hard because I've been lucky to ride on just about every continent. And Europe, Europe is always good. That'll never get old. But America is just so big and beautiful. I mean, there's so many places in America.
So much to see.
And that'll keep me busy for many, many years.
I don't think we'll ever run out.
Yep.
Even being fortunate enough to do what we do, like I said, the list just grows. So
And when you're done, you can always start over again because, just for example, I mean, 30 years ago, my parents did Route 66. Now we're doing it, and ideally, in 30 years from now, I get to do this again with my children. And who knows, maybe we'll even see a familiar photo in a museum, like the Devil's Road Museum. Who knows?
what always does it for us is we get new camera equipment, and we're like, we got to go back because we just capture it better now. That's happened a few times.
Yeah, it would be cool to redo our very first cross-country road trip, but with good camera equipment.
Yeah, that would be cool because we didn't end up with a ton of photos from that. I mean, we got a bunch, but they were on a little point and shoot. That was before
No, I had the D60.
we.
I
Yeah.
carried an Icon.
Yeah. And
was
now
good.
and now you could just have a cell phone.
Yeah.
And it's good.
It was good, but we weren't as good of photographers as we are
Exactly.
now.
Yeah. Might have been user development. So speaking of Route 66, we got you something.
You got me something?
Yeah.
I get a surprise?
Yeah.
What is this? It's in a paper bag.
So we have a theory that when your parents went on this Route 66 trip, this was before RoadRunner was conceived. And I think that some of the things along the way of this trip influenced their naming of the magazine and
It's some top tier speculation, without a doubt.
yeah.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
A Roadrunner bird. And we are in Tucumcari.
Got it.
Got it
We
right.
are in Tucumcari. It's a terribly difficult town name for me to say.
They had a
Tucumcari.
big one, but we thought you wouldn't be able to get it home.
This is absolutely perfect, and I already know where it's going. But no, you're right. You know, deep down, I mean, the universe has a strange way of working out. And you're absolutely right. I mean, they were in America, they were in the country of the Roadrunner, and then all these years later, they start a magazine called RoadRunner. There's definitely a thread that is being woven through here.
Is it unique to the? It's unique to the States, right? The bird.
I think so, yeah.
I think so. So, I mean, it's pretty good speculation. There's a pretty good chance it had something to do with it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hope you like
Our
it.
pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thanks for riding with us all these years.
Yeah. And there's many more to come. But, you know, one person is missing, and that's my brother. But he just had a little baby. So we cut him some slack that he
Yeah.
has to get some time
This year
off.
it's okay.
Yeah, but he's going to have to come next year. I already told him he can't. He doesn't have a reason to back out then unless they keep going at it. But we'll see. Yeah. Hey, I'm speechless. Thank you, Roadrunner. But we still have some miles to cover, and yeah, looks like the rain has passed on. So I think we should head on down 66. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Let's roll.
We're about halfway through. So we got another, 1,400 miles, 1,200 miles?
All right, let's hit the road.
Sounds good.